Good evening. In the fast-paced world of reality television, we often see stars burn bright and then vanish into total obscurity. But tonight, we are looking at a case that defies every rule in the industry handbook. It has been 14 years since a shy, long-haired teenager stepped onto the Britain's Got Talent stage and delivered a vocal performance that left the world breathless. At the time, we thought we were watching the birth of a star. What we didn't realize was that we were witnessing a young man standing on the edge of a total collapse. Today, in 2026, Jonathan Antoine has re-emerged, but the person we are seeing in the headlines bears almost no resemblance to that boy from 2012. From a radical physical transformation to the truth about his split from his partner, the investigative trail reveals a story far more complex than a simple talent show success. But before we get into his 2026 comeback, we have to address the hidden crisis that nearly ended his story before it even began. You might think you remember the nerves on Jonathan's face during his audition, but those weren't just stage jitters. They were the symptoms of a deep-seated personal crisis that almost forced him to exit the stage of life entirely. To understand the Jonathan Antoine of 2026, we have to look at the medical reality of 2012. Long before the glitz and glamour, Jonathan was navigating a world that felt increasingly hostile. Reports have surfaced detailing how the relentless bullying he faced in his youth led to a severe breakdown just months before his television debut. This wasn't just a tough time. It was a period where he was profoundly unwell, often unable to leave his room. When he stood before the judges, he wasn't just singing for a career. He was singing for a reason to keep going. Many insiders now reveal that the production team was terrified he wouldn't be able to handle the pressure. He was essentially living on a razor's edge throughout the competition. While the audience saw a triumph of the underdog, the reality was a high-stakes medical situation where one wrong comment could have sent him spiraling back into his darkest mental health lows. He has since opened up about those darkest nights, hinting that if it weren't for the intervention of a few key mentors, the 2026 icon we see today might never have existed. It raises the question, how much suffering for art should we actually expect from a 17-year-old? But as Jonathan began to heal, a new threat emerged, one that came from the very man who promised to make him a star. The industry calls it the golden handshake. But for Jonathan, Simon Cowell's offer was more like a poison chalice that forced him to choose between his soul and his paycheck. We all saw the televised moment where Simon suggested Jonathan should dump Charlotte, but the behind-the-scenes negotiations were reportedly much more intense. Investigative sources suggest that the pressure to go solo wasn't just a suggestion. It was a calculated move to maximize profit at the expense of a friendship. When Jonathan uttered that famous no, he wasn't just being loyal. He was committing a cardinal sin in the eyes of the music industry elite. This act of defiance reportedly led to a cooling of his relationship with the major labels. He chose the hard road, remaining with Charlotte for a 2-album deal that, while successful, lacked the massive marketing machine that usually follows a Cowell protege. The rumors of a feud between the duo that followed their eventual split in 2014 were often fueled by an industry that couldn't understand why they'd walk away from a winning formula. In reality, the bitterness wasn't between Jonathan and Charlotte. It was between Jonathan and a system that tried to commodify his loyalty. Even today, in 2026, the ripples of that decision are felt, as Jonathan has built an independent empire that bypasses the traditional gatekeepers who tried to control him. But just as he was finding his footing, he received a medical diagnosis that would explain a lifetime of feeling like an outsider. For over a decade, the media labeled him as socially awkward or eccentric, but a recent medical revelation has turned that narrative on its head and exposed the industry's failure to protect its most vulnerable stars. In a series of candid interviews leading into 2026, Jonathan revealed his diagnosis of being on the autism spectrum. This wasn't a setback for him. It was the missing piece of the puzzle. Reporters covering his tour noted that he often struggled with the sensory overload of massive crowds and the performative nature of press junkets. By finally putting a name to his experiences, Jonathan has become a leading voice for neurodiversity in the arts. He's exposed how the system often interprets autistic traits as diva behavior or uncooperativeness. This diagnosis allowed him to rebuild his career on his own terms, implementing quiet zones on tour and changing how he interacts with his fanbase. It was a revelation that fundamentally changed his 2026 output. He no longer feels the need to mask his true self to fit the opera singer archetype. This new transparency has actually strengthened his connection with his audience, making him more than just a voice. He's now a symbol of authentic living in a world of fake personas. But as he mastered his internal world, his external appearance began to undergo a change so radical it left his old fans in total shock. If you look at the promotional posters for his 2026 world tour, you'll see a man who is literally half the size of the teenager we met in 2012. But this wasn't a fad diet or a quick fix for the cameras. Jonathan's physical transformation has been one of the most talked about stories in the classical music world over the last 2 years. Dropping over 50 pounds wasn't about vanity. It was a calculated survival tactic to ensure his voice, his primary instrument, could last for decades. He's gone on record describing the painful reality of his previous lifestyle, where the weight was a physical manifestation of his emotional armor. The 2026 version of Jonathan Antoine is a dedicated athlete of the voice. He's incorporated a rigorous 10,000 steps a day protocol and a specialized diet that keeps his vocal cords in peak condition. The shocking part for many fans wasn't just the weight loss, but the surge in confidence that came with it. He's moved from being a performer who hid behind a microphone, to one who commands the entire stage with a new, lean energy. This physical rebirth has silenced the critics who claimed he wouldn't have the stamina for a global solo career. However, this transformation also reignited the speculation mill, with some wondering if the pressure to look like a pop star finally got to him, or if this was truly his own choice. He was once the kid from BGT, but in 2026, Jonathan Antoine is sitting on a multi-million-dollar empire that proves you don't need a reality TV contract to become a global icon. His latest project, All of Me, isn't just an album, it's a manifesto of his independence. Our reporting shows that by taking control of his masters and his branding, Jonathan has outturned many of his contemporary pop stars, who are still trapped in predatory label deals. He's selling out venues from the Royal Albert Hall to the ancient theaters of Italy, proving that classical crossover is a powerhouse genre when handled with genuine passion. But perhaps the most surprising element of his 2026 status is his refusal to move to a Hollywood mansion. He famously stayed in his family home for years, citing his need for a sanctuary away from the toxicity of fame. Even now, with his global success, he maintains a small-town humility that baffles the paparazzi. The rumors of his massive net worth are often contrasted with his low-key lifestyle, creating a mystery around where the man ends and the icon begins. He has successfully bridged the gap between being a viral sensation and a legitimate musical force, a feat very few reality stars have ever achieved. As we conclude our 2026 deep dive, the story of Jonathan Antoine serves as a stark reminder to the entertainment industry. He was a young man who was told he had to shed his skin to be successful, to leave his friend, to hide his struggles, and to fit a specific mold. By refusing to comply, he became something much more powerful, a self-made icon. His journey through mental health battles, physical transformations, and industry blacklisting has culminated in a career that is as robust as his 4-octave range. Jonathan Antoine didn't just survive Britain's Got Talent, he conquered the aftermath. As we look toward his future performances, one thing is clear: The boy who said no is now the man who has it all. His story isn't just about music. It's about the uncompromising power of being yourself, no matter how many judges tell you otherwise.